There is a way of moving through the day that feels smooth, efficient, almost effortless. Actions follow one another without friction. The body knows what to do before the mind fully arrives. The routine unfolds on its own. Wake up, check something, respond, move, repeat. Nothing feels wrong. Nothing feels urgent. And yet, by the end of the day, there is a strange emptiness, an impression of having been present everywhere, but nowhere in particular. Living on autopilot doesn't feel like distraction. It feels like functionality. Tasks are completed, obligations are met, conversations happen, decisions are made quickly, often without hesitation. From the outside, everything appears organized. From the inside, however, there is little sense of choice. The day seems to run itself, guided by habits, cues, and familiar sequences that no longer require attention. In everyday moments, this shows up quietly: reaching for the phone without noticing, responding automatically to messages, moving from one task to the next without pausing to register the transition, meals eaten while thinking about something else, commutes that leave no memory. The mind is active, but rarely reflective, aware enough to function, not enough to interrupt the flow. Because nothing breaks down, the pattern stays invisible. Autopilot doesn't announce itself. It feels safe, predictable, efficient. But beneath that smooth surface, something subtle is missing: the experience of choosing rather than reacting, of inhabiting moments instead of passing through them. This mode of functioning is often mistaken for balance or maturity, being efficient, staying productive, keeping things under control. But living on autopilot isn't the same as being intentional. The difference is subtle. Intentional living involves awareness of direction. Autopilot relies on momentum. One responds to what appears, moves to what's next, and rarely stops to question why a particular action was taken at all. From a psychological and behavioral standpoint, autopilot emerges when repeated actions become deeply automated. The brain learns sequences that require minimal conscious input. This is efficient, but it comes with a trade-off. When actions no longer require attention, attention begins to withdraw. Decisions become reflexes. Reactions replace reflection. Life continues to function, but awareness narrows. Over time, this creates a specific internal experience. Days feel full yet strangely empty. Effort is expended, but meaning feels thin. Because the mind is rarely invited to pause, larger questions never fully form. Direction is assumed rather than examined. Goals are inherited from routine rather than chosen consciously. Autopilot isn't caused by laziness or disinterest. It's a response to constant demands and limited mental space. When life feels busy, the mind defaults to efficiency. It chooses the familiar path, not because it's best, but because it costs less energy. And once that pattern sets in, moving through the day without awareness begins to feel normal, even necessary. There is a moment when autopilot becomes most noticeable, usually when the day ends. Not because something went wrong, but because very little stands out. Events happened, tasks were handled, conversations took place, yet recalling the day feels difficult. Details blur, transitions disappear. It's not memory loss, it's lack of imprint. Nothing stayed long enough to leave a mark. Psychologically, this happens because awareness was rarely present at the moment of action. When behavior runs automatically, the mind records outcomes, not experiences. The body moves through sequences it already knows, while attention floats just above the surface. Actions are executed, but not fully inhabited. And what isn't inhabited doesn't consolidate into meaningful memory. Behaviorally, autopilot thrives on predictability. The same routes, the same responses, the same patterns of thought. This predictability reduces friction, but it also reduces engagement. The mind stops asking questions because it already knows the answers it expects. Over time, curiosity narrows, choice becomes rare, reaction becomes default. This is why living on autopilot often feels calm, yet oddly distant. There is little internal conflict, but also little internal presence. The day moves smoothly, but without depth. And when depth is missing, life can feel like it's happening nearby, rather than being lived from the inside. As this state persists, its effects begin to reach deeper than daily routine. Autopilot slowly reshapes the relationship with choice. Decisions stop feeling like decisions and start feeling like defaults, not because options disappeared, but because questioning them requires interruption, and interruption feels inefficient. The mind learns to move forward without stopping, even when stopping would allow redirection. From a psychological perspective, awareness is what creates agency. When awareness fades, agency thins. Life continues to unfold, but mostly along pre-existing tracks. Habits guide behavior. Expectations guide responses. Emotional reactions follow familiar patterns.
Over time, this creates a quiet sense of detachment, not sadness, not dissatisfaction, just a feeling that life is being managed rather than lived. There is also an emotional cost that often remains unspoken. When moments are rarely inhabited, they rarely nourish. Pleasure becomes muted, discomfort becomes background noise. The emotional range narrows, not because feelings disappear, but because they are not fully attended to. Everything feels acceptable, but little feels meaningful. Autopilot offers stability, but it slowly trades depth for smoothness. The days feel easier to get through, yet harder to remember. And while nothing feels urgently wrong, something essential feels absent, an internal sense of presence that cannot form without pauses, attention, and choice.
Over time, living on autopilot begins to alter how time itself is experienced. Days seem to pass quickly, yet leave little residue. Weeks blur together. When asked what stood out recently, the answer often feels vague, not because nothing happened, but because few moments were registered with enough attention to become anchors. Life moves, but it doesn't settle. From a psychological standpoint, perception of time depends on awareness. Moments that are consciously noticed gain texture. Those that are rushed through automatically compress. When much of the day is spent reacting rather than choosing, the brain records efficiency, not experience. The result is a strange acceleration of life, busy days that feel empty in hindsight. This often leads to a quiet unease, a sense that time is slipping away faster than expected, that important things are happening somewhere else, or later, or not quite now. Even comfortable routines can start to feel thin. There is motion without weight, continuity without presence. Autopilot doesn't create crisis, it creates numbness, a life that feels manageable yet distant. And because nothing is obviously wrong, the pattern sustains itself. The days continue to run smoothly, while the sense of actually being there grows faint. Perhaps the most important detail is not the routine itself, but the absence of interruption within it. Autopilot persists because nothing asks for awareness. Actions flow smoothly, habits carry the weight. The mind stays just engaged enough to function, but not enough to question direction. And without questioning, days repeat themselves almost effortlessly. This doesn't happen because people don't care, it happens because caring requires presence. Presence asks for pauses, and pauses feel unnecessary in a life optimized for efficiency. Over time, the mind learns to avoid them, not consciously, but practically. It chooses continuity over reflection, movement over meaning. When this pattern is noticed, something subtle shifts. Not control, not immediate change, just recognition. Awareness begins to appear in the spaces between actions, small moments where behavior could continue automatically, but doesn't. These moments are brief, but they matter. They are where choice becomes possible again. Living on autopilot isn't a failure of intention. It's a mode the mind enters when life feels full and time feels scarce. Observing it doesn't break the routine overnight, but it creates distance from it, and that distance allows moments to be inhabited rather than passed through. It may be worth noticing when the day seems to run on its own, when actions happen without memory, when choices feel pre-selected. In many cases, life isn't lacking direction. Awareness has simply been set aside. Here, these patterns are observed calmly.